Welcome back to Random Musing. For anyone unfamiliar with this channel, it's just I'm just gonna provide my viewpoint on a lot of random topics of interest. Try to cover a broad range, but whatever comes to my mind. Today's video, it's going to be about success, or what constitutes success. And my belief is it comes in many different shapes and forms. You can't really quantify it absolutely. Just like normality, if someone says this is normal, well, normality does not even uh, exist. It's a representation of something positioned relative to the global uh, population, and we cannot, even if suppose there's a midpoint, that defines the trait. Like if you take normality in terms of traits, you take all these traits, you can't really find the midpoint. It's imaginary. It doesn't it you can't you can't quantify it basically. So normality it's a relative term. Um, Same with success. I mean, it can be very subjective, but success is a lot of it's relative to where the society is positioned as well. The growth where we are currently, of course, we're in a technological age, so it's definitely different than previous generations. Success is based on the limit. If you define, let's suppose you define an upper limit of potential, and there's like where the potential that we have within, based on the information that we possess. Knowledge is like today. Knowledge is circulating. We have internet. We're saturated with so much entertainment, knowledge. We have access to so many videos. If you want to grow, or if want to develop in some way, I mean, you can search on Google and you'll find so many different areas. And they're ultimately, we tend to review the extremes, and essentially there could be this upper bounds that could be a desire, or you want to achieve, uh, get to this position, and you may deem that as success. But ultimately, success should be constrained within the a region that satisfies the conditions of like the individual. Because ultimately, like for me, if I chose to try to become an NBA player, of course, based on where I've positioned myself in life, according to interest and reward feedback, I'm not, basically the rate of change in my progression is going to be pretty slow relative to, let's say, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, the great, basketball players. It would take me a lot more energy to get to the same position that they were able to achieve. And if I base my success on the distance between the nodes, or the position in my mind, well, of course, that depreciates the level of success. So when you define when you quantify some object or whatnot, it's going to facilitate more insecurity, and it's going to dampen the uh, how you're going to, I guess, quantify success. So you shouldn't really quantify it. It has to do with the constraint, basically your interest. Ultimately, if you have an interest, let's suppose you have a strong interest, well, the rate of change and progression is going to be higher. Now, is it going to be at the maximum rate? No. I mean, most people are going to be distributed in towards the center, the average. Um, that's just the way it is. It's ultimately, it's like throwing the dice. Your parents had, they had certain genetic potential. Any, ultimately, uh, potential can be defined again in many different ways. Um, where ultimately it's the key is not to reference or where you are relative to the absolute or the maximum uh, point of reference, because essentially in any given field there's a lot of times there's going to be exist someone who's going to surpass that level, and it could happen in the future. It's most likely already, but you really don't know either. That's why, like, yes, you can define a relative scale, but you don't know, like, absolutely. It's so it gets way more complex than that. Um, so yeah, success. It's just really just finding your interest or the field that yields the rate of change and progression is optimized, or it's gonna ultimately it's gonna speed up, because essentially reward is related to that. If I worked on something and I'm just not moving forward, I'm not moving forward, the reward is not going to be so great. It's proportional to the movement. It's proportional to the distance from the initial point, and it's also proportional to the work that you need to expend in order to move in such direction. But the thing is, there's so many different fields in terms for that can where you can progress. Knowledge, it doesn't have to be necessarily, someone wants power, so be it. If someone wants, uh, if someone wants a nice, their goal is to have, nice, live in a really nice area or on an island or own their own island or private jet, then so be it. Ultimately, you have a direction, you have a point, and and if you have a strong interest in something, well, ultimately it's not going to be the reward's not going to be so much uh, depreciated, because ultimately when something interests you, you have the patience. You generally have the patience to pursue it for a much longer period, and then the success will generally follow. If you're not interested, you're not going to have much patience. It's just gonna it's like you're in a class, and just imagine a professor that repeats the same thing over and over and over and over. Are you learning anything new? No, you're not getting anything that's novel. It's just repeated, repeated, repeated. Eventually, you'd go crazy if you took away all social media, you took away all cell phone, and you just had to listen to that over and over. You'd go insane. So, you know, when you're not interested in something, patience approaches zero. You basically have to find something to feed that reward in some way. And the reward is obviously there's many different ways to receive it. Ultimately, I guess the thing is initial point, like when you come to this or initially come to this world, you initially have the curiosity, the driven uh, nature, because everything's not is novel at that point. It's not, and then eventually, once you categorize things, we constantly have to gravitate towards change, because ultimately, if society is going to change in a whole, well, the individual and the parts add up to the whole. So it's the individual level, it's got to expand, and then ultimately. Um, it's reinforced by the how would I put it? It's reinforced when there's overlap and intersection of all these opportunities. So with success, a lot of it has to do also with opportunity. What I mean by that is, think about it. Any because we live, it's based on position XYZ, and there's time. It's always expanding, and we're you got to think opportunities exist outside of our current uh, worldview. So there could exist a point anywhere in the world where if you were to encounter that scenario or been there at the right time, at the right play or yeah, right time and position, it could be an opportunity because ultimately, um, there's going to be potential has to be realized. Anytime you have a job, you go through an interview, potential is realized. You have a success, and there's ultimately it's according to that. But also, you had the opportunity because you crossed that path. So ultimately, and because there's so much out there, the opportunities are so immense. There's more opportunities today than ever because ultimately, uh, imagine we're reducing the variables that we're exposed to. Let's just suppose there's only a few variables. Well, if there's only a few variables, the opportunities start approaching zero as if a number of variables approach, converge to zero. Um, so what I mean by that is like the internet. The internet is full of many different variables, and so many, and just because of that, there's opportunities, different points, at different times that we don't ever meet or we never satisfy, even though they're out there, because we live in a localized region, and therefore it's related to uh, how many paths we cross within this localized region. If I were to just sit here, motionless, not say a word, I'd die. I'd pass. Ultimately, I don't even know. Like, if I were at this apartment, based on how many people or I know currently, well, yes, the probability is now going to be higher because my existence has been known, and therefore, if I just sat here, like there, if you know more people, well, there's going to be more positions such that uh, you you basically have someone maybe consider something is off. Well, if I didn't know anyone and I just was positioned here, I just essentially more likely I just uh, I'd die of starvation. Right, there would be no external influence coming in from radially. So you could kind of like that's kind of analogous to the opportunities. They're existing somewhere externally, and I guess when you cross more paths and you have more influence, that's why I like uh, introverts and extroverts. So extroverts are going to have the benefit in certain areas because well, they cover more ground. But the thing is, they may have more friends and so forth, possibly, and because of that, there's more opportunities in terms of networking and so forth because they covered more range. If you don't ever go out of your place, if you're always secluding yourself, well, there's a lot of missed opportunities that could have been there. And ultimately, when it comes to opportunities, there has to be a limit of what someone has to witness some potential. So that's why like it's key to have like your interest and likely when you spend a lot of energy and you improve and refine your skills and so keep going and you don't give up. Well, eventually there's going to be a subset that realizes that potential. And the subset you can imagine increases as you refine and increase your skill. So if the subset increases, if you always stay fixated on things and you're always not moving and you're immovable and you're not going outward, you're not going externally, because a lot of times it has to do with social impact. If you know people, you can translate into that successful or in that area, that domain of success, I would say. There's so many different area domains that exist, but initially the potential has to be realized, and that's why like with all these YouTube videos circulating and marketing, and there's even a lot of manipulation out there, but ultimately it's just getting out there, you know, some form, some way, constantly just externally or seeking the external um, kind of globally expanding your region of influence, and therefore you target more nodes, and therefore the subset that has expanded, you've covered more area. Therefore, within those nodes, they basically, once they know your existence, then basically that creates that opportunity, and ultimately, that's really how I view it. But there's so many different areas. So success, could be knowledge as well, like just learning. You may just want to be introverted and you want to learn. So that's still a success, because as long as you're growing in one direction or the other, you're being successful, and that's how I would define it. It's just we have to progress because we can't. Our reward feedback allows us to do so, and ultimately motivation and so forth. Once that depreciates, well, we start, you know, everything gets sapped out. The perception collapses, especially in like depression. Uh, the potential, your view of what exists, externally, as the potential of the world, it collapses. It's basically like your perception closes in towards a point, and that happens when you let the even. I guess with depression, it could be biologically, or chemical disruption, and a lot of times it's both external influence and the chemical disruption. So, if you let things, if you compare or constantly comparing, contrasting, where your position is relative to the extremes, and you let that affect you negatively, well, that just pulls you down, and ultimately it depreciates the probability of actually achieving it. So ultimately, the key is just you push on, and you don't let like the noise or the external or whatever is out in the horizon. Let it just influence. You gotta maintain the contentment and just understand that you're moving, and if you move forward in some way, you're yielding a success, and understand that because of the range and the variability, it doesn't really matter. Like there's always going to be someone who succeeds or surpasses, whether now or later on. It's very, 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 very likely, and the key is utilizing that potential to project forward, because ultimately someone got to this position, and you got to just learn from that, but not just take it with a grain of salt. Don't just like completely um, consider that like the route. Ultimately, you can't. You got to have a unique route that satisfies um, basically the all the traits that, or satisfy all the strengths that you possess. So essentially, if someone goes one direction to achieve it, well, you can utilize it, but the key is not 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 being not trying to do the exact, or get to that exact, or having the expectation of getting to that exact position, because the expectation, it's always good to challenge yourself, but at the same time, um, f- find keep learning many different areas, and then the formulate the path that satisfies your interest, or it satisfies your or satisfy, or makes you say happy, or just because ultimately there's what's good for one, uh, basically everything changes, like what's garbage for one person is not for another person. So basically it's always going to be um, um, different. The route that you take relative to others, it's going to be different, and that's the key, is a journey, because it's different. um, it's the key is this being content or satisfied, satisfied that you found a unique route, even if the you don't reach that limit that you may have wanted. Like the expectation is the upper limit, and if you don't reach that, you can't beat yourself down because ultimately, if you do, well, that depreciates a lot of different variables, and the key is you keep moving, and um, just keep aiming higher, but don't have like an absolute limit or an absolute frame of reference or just the key I think is just do better than you did the previous day. Optimize the traits that you possess currently, do it uniquely, and follow, kind of be independent. Don't be so influenced. Like if you let the media or the government or everything sway you, or you're taking on the image that they want, or you're basically just kind of you're being swayed and influenced, and basically that's going to cause more transience, or it's going to cause more volatility. So it's always good to um, stand firm with your own, uh, whether it's vision or goals, or what you want to achieve, and you have to be, not create like some fixated bound or upper bound. Just progress and progress and progress, and and that's it. Once you compare like the weight of something relative to another, well, that's just going to facilitate insecurity. So yeah, I think in anything success, it's just finding the right niche at the time, or area, and just finding a way to uh, keep keep moving, and just anytime you find a barrier, that's a challenge, and the key is accepting the challenge. um, and that's kind of how it goes with Seneca, one of the great philosophers. He said, it's not because things are difficult you dare not venture, it's because you dare not venture that things are difficult. So difficult challenges may be perceived, the initial point is always going to possibly be perceived as monumental. But the difficulty comes in the perception. But ultimately, once you step in and venture into the domain, there could be some initial apprehension. It may not be as comfortable, but you need that a little bit of uncomfortability, or you need a little bit of pain, or because with anything comes, negatives can turn into a positive. So by venturing into it, you'll find out, yes, that as you adapt to the situation, as you improve and you refine your skill set, you're converging the difficulty within that within that region, or certain region, converges to zero. Of course, you're going to open up other regions, and that's going to add layers of complexity. But that's the point. You keep adding layers of complexity. You adapt. It's like climbing a mountain. You keep going, and of course, uh, as you go through different barriers, there could be a new barrier that's a it's a lot of times a subset of previous barriers. It's more broad, but because of those previous experiences, you're able to get beyond, or utilize that to construct or formulate a way to get beyond the barrier, so you have more variables to lead to success. So yes, this is just my viewpoint on success. I clearly uh, on or do not like. It's not perfect. An explanation is nothing's perfect, and it's just anything that I believe at this point is just based on my localized region of experience. Of course, if I traveled over a broader region, yes, or this expands, or my knowledge base or whatnot expands, and ultimately, it really depends on the positioning, and just uh, the uh, the change in the genetics over time, and ultimately everything always changes. So the viewpoints that we possess is always going to be evolving, and there's not, it's not, like I said, yeah, it's not static. So yeah, the key is just to, I think, or remain, open to, uh, just yeah, open to the possibility that it could be wrong. I think, it's always good to, uh, refine things and not go to like an absolute conclusion or an instantaneous. Uh, you may have like assumptions and it could be spot on, but the thing is the probability, or to me, I view it as you're converging towards an absolute understanding. You're never going to reach absolute understanding, but as you go through different domains or different subsets, you eventually converge within those subsets. But it opens up new subsets, and then you have to converge, and opens up new subsets, and you have to converge, and you never reach that, uh, absolute convergence. So clearly, it's like it's now gets to like, the generations of society. How in 200 years, possibly that humans are going to view us as, uh, ape-like, uh, or behaving like apes, or just, could be, like stupid or so forth. But it's just a relative. Like, it's relative to how we've progressed, and we do not know. We can only make projections to a certain range. Like, Newton, or they made projections well beyond what we a lot of people can, are able to achieve, and the projection is proportional to how the sources of information or knowledge that we have currently. So of course, if you have more, you can make a larger leap, and maybe prediction or projection, uh, the possibility of that. But in 200 years or so, it's just going to be, there's going to be things that were like, man, that we never would have believed, that just came about. So yeah, it's just, especially as you keep going on and on, it's just opening many new domains that we didn't even know exist. It's constantly opening up. So same with success. It's like you just got to constantly open up new areas, and just keep going, but do not define these limits, and do not reference yourself, and compare contrast, because that potentially, it's just keeping your mindset strong, preventing all this influence, not letting things like, super, or just failures really drag you down to the floor, because that affects so many different areas, health, especially. And a lot of times, you notice when you get in a certain position, and your mindset changes. Yes, it becomes more positive. Then you associate with people within that niche or that domain, and now your whole perspective, things change. And a lot of times, uh, there's a lot of influence within certain regions. So basically, because of all the subsets that exist today, there's so many different areas, and it's getting funneled in. Like in the U.S., multiple cultures coming in. So yes, the potential expands, but at the same time, it's causing like, uh, it can cause a lot of positives, and then it also causes a lot of negatives, especially like nowadays with media and other factors. But but yeah, I just think this is just how I view success, and that's all I have right now. I didn't really come to complete, uh, conclusion, because this channel is more about rambling than anything else. Um, and I'm really, honestly, when I'm creating this content, I'm not editing. I'm just going full force, and honestly, of course, I've probably made mistakes, errors, whatever in this discussion. But the thing is, I just don't let it affect, me. I could refine it and refine it over and over to get it, meet some expectation, but it doesn't matter. To me, it's just, yet I do this. I keep, improving, and ultimately, whereas I keep searching for knowledge, well, I refine it and maybe get a more in depth understanding, or get a more in depth understanding in it, and therefore I make less mistakes within a certain range of within a certain field. So, I yeah, just mainly just create this channel to kind of just quiet my mind. I like discussing stuff like this, but especially now during the Corona, uh, I'm pretty much at my place most of the time, uh, secluded. So I could either talk to myself or just or do YouTube videos, which I think this is more constructive um, for my time. But yes, I that's just all I have for today or now, and I will the next topic I have no idea, but it will pop up in my mind randomly, and yeah, I'll see you next time.